Hello and welcome to the show. I'm here on Project Cars with a challenge. We start today with the SuperKart. This is quite frankly a crazy contraption. It has a 90 horsepower engine, which compared to some of the cars that I've driven on various games, doesn't sound like too much. But when you put that much power in a tiny, lightweight go-kart, it has some quite frankly dramatic effects on the performance. This kart will do almost 140 miles an hour. That's very quick for a go-kart, and because it is so light, it is incredibly fast through the corners. It can carry an awful lot of corner speed. You can be very late on the brakes with this. It will take a while getting used to it. I will say that. It will take a long time getting used to driving one of these, because it is a very twitchy handling. It has a lot of grip, yes, but it can be very twitchy with it. It took me a good few laps at some other tracks just to kind of get a feel for driving one of these. It's like nothing else you will drive on this game. Also, curbs are horrifying in this. You touch a curb, it will spin it. Pretty much. A couple of the lower curbs I could get away with around here, but really had to stay off the curbs. It would just spin the thing out. Also, the track is quite bumpy in places, and you really notice it in a go-kart. But once you do get the hang of it, it is very quick around a lap of the track. And it kind of got me thinking. I was curious, just how quick would this be compared to normal road cars and normal race cars? So I set out to find the answer. Now, each vehicle was given 8 laps at this track to set a lap time. The SuperKart's time was a 44.9. To start off with the road cars, I went for sort of the bottom end of the spectrum. I say it's bottom end of the spectrum. The Ford Focus RS is one of the most powerful front-wheel drive hot hatches, or production hot hatches anyway, that there has ever been. But this is sort of the slower end of the road car section that I have to use on Project Cars. I thought it would be a good starting point to see. I didn't really know what to expect. I mean, I know the SuperKart is pretty fast, but we're putting up against some proper sporty road cars at least. These will be quicker in a straight line eventually, but these will be kind of, can they carry that sort of speed around the corners? And the Focus is not the easiest of cars. In Project Cars, if you don't have race tyres, the road cars can be quite difficult to drive. They just don't have the grip. The Focus doesn't have the grip or the brakes or the acceleration of the SuperKart. And the best lap time I got with it was a 55.3. That's 11 seconds off the SuperKart's time. That's quite a long way down. So we moved up a little bit to a BMW 1M. I'm not a huge fan of these cars. I can never quite figure out what it is. I don't know. They just don't do it. I like the colours. The colour choice was good. But they just don't do it for me. The 1M. It's not a bad car to drive. Again, much like the Focus, it will take a little while to get used to driving road cars on this game, because they just do not have as much, certainly after going from the stupid go-kart, they just do not have anywhere near as much grip. Also, there is a curb here that can roll cars. The one that I'm just going around here, I'm a little bit too wide with the BMW. You clip that inside curb. I did get the Ford Focus up onto 2 wheels at one point, quite spectacularly onto 2 wheels. At one point, scary curb, that thing. Didn't have any problems with the BMW. BMW, though, didn't go much quicker, 55.0. I mean, these are fairly sensible road cars that were such a long way off the time of the SuperKart. So we had to move on towards the supercars. We have here a rough RGT8. Now, we're sort of firmly in the high-end sports car, supercar territory. I mean, you're probably looking at £100,000 perhaps. I don't know how much roughs cost. I presume roughs are more expensive than 911s. I don't know, I've never seen a rough in real life. But yeah, this is a fast car. These are some seriously fast vehicles, and they're much nicer to drive than the Focus, the BMW. It's got more grip in it. It's got more acceleration. The brakes, you still got to be careful. You can't get too carried away in these cars when it comes to trying to get them stopped. But in general, everything is a little bit quicker. But I think it's 4-wheel drive as well. I'm assuming it is. I'm not actually sure. Anyway, it went quicker than the 2 previous cars, as you would expect, but it did a 51.7. And this is a let's say £100,000 supercar. Still a long way off a little go-kart. So we were still so far off the times that I was looking for. I had to get a little bit drastic. Moved up to a Pagani Zonda Cinque. I love these cars. These are fantastic vehicles. As I get things a little bit wrong into turn 1, may have slightly locked the rear brakes up there. That was quite It's quite a scary thing, going 90 degrees into the first corner, completely yeah, it was a little bit easy to lock the brakes up on this car when I wasn't quite expecting it. Again, we've got better brakes, we've got more grip. You've got to be a bit careful on power delivery now. You're starting to get to some seriously powerful cars. So out of some of these slower corners, and this is a surprisingly bumpy track. I didn't realise how bumpy it was. You've got to be quite careful putting the power, and you'll see how much the car is moving around through some of these corners. I mean, it's a bit better in the Zonda. You've still got to be a little bit careful on all of that. And still the Zonda, it went quicker, went to a 50.4. We're still looking almost sort of 5-6 seconds off the time set by the SuperKart. I was really surprised. I thought we would beat some of the road cars. I didn't expect us to end up at sort of at this end of the spectrum with the McLaren P1. This is one of the fastest hypercars in the world at the moment. I am not a particular fan of the P1, nor the Porsche or the LaFerrari. I'm not a particular fan of these ultra-modern hypercars, but I will concede they are incredibly fast. These are phenomenally quick vehicles. They have decent grip, they have decent brakes. Of course, they are very, very quick accelerating. And if anything, this is more forgiving than the Zonda. It's not too bad to drive. Of all of the cars that I've driven in this video, most of them I've driven beforehand at different tracks. I haven't driven the P1 before today. It's one of the few cars that I haven't driven. And while yes, it was quick, it did have good grip, it was still no match for the SuperKart. It still couldn't brake as late or carry as much corner speed, and the lap time was a 49.3. I mean, we're getting quicker, but this is a £1 million hypercar, and it's still nowhere near the lap time set by a little go-kart. The fastest road car that I tested was the Gumpert Apollo. This is basically a road legal race car. That's all it is. It's not the prettiest of cars, it's quite a strange one looking at it, but it's all there for a reason. It is designed to be as quick as it possibly can around a racetrack, and yes, it is very quick. And I'm not sure if this is running on slicks. I'm presuming it isn't. I don't think it is, just by the fact that it doesn't have the grip that the race cars get. It's very, very noticeable on here, the difference between a race car that's running slick tyres and a road car that isn't running slick tyres. This is the closest you really get, sort of, to, or between the two, I should say. The Gumpert is a very good car. It was a nice car to drive. It doesn't take too long to get used to it because it has got a lot of grip. You can brake quite late, but it's still not quick enough. 48.3 was the fastest lap time I could get out of the Gumpert Apollo. So I had to move on to the race cars. I started with the Mercedes 190e Cosworth, the DTM car. Now, the reason why I was thinking, these are going to start challenging the go-kart is because of the tyres. This is not going to be as quick in a straight line as a McLaren P1 or the Zonda. However, because it has got lovely slick tyres and lovely racing brakes, and it's not particularly heavy. I mean, these are all going to be stripped out race cars. You can brake later, you can carry a lot more corner speed, and since that's where the go-kart is making up its time, after all, I mean, the go-kart's not going to be as quick as the Zonda or the McLaren in a straight line, I figured perhaps that these would start to have a chance, and these are also much nicer to drive, much easier to drive. It's a lot easier to push these cars hard as well around a track without having a big accident. The Mercedes, unsurprisingly perhaps, wasn't the quickest. It went 50.0. I mean, it's as quick as a Zonda Cinque, which is not too bad. Seeing the other sort of the times that the supercars were setting, not particularly surprised that the old DTM car wasn't quicker than the SuperKart. Up next, we have got one of my favourite race cars, the Ford Capri. I love the DRM vehicles. They weren't really raced for very long, and they don't really appear in very many games. The Capri is appearing in a few more now, but these are fantastically crazy racing cars. I mean, these are pretty damn quick vehicles. I'm not sure how many years they were around for. It was a few. They make a fantastic noise. It's a shame the BMW M1 DRM car isn't in more games, because that thing is bonkers. But yeah, these are quick cars. These are very quick cars to drive. They're very easy cars to drive, and I have quite a lot of experience driving this vehicle. I've driven it certainly a lot more than I have the SuperKart, and I really like it. It's loads and loads of grip. You can brake pretty damn late in it, but it's still not quicker. 46.609 was the fastest lap time I could set. It's getting closer. We're getting closer to the SuperKart, but it's still slower. It's still a couple of seconds off. We move next to a BMW M1 Pro car. We don't have the DRM version, but we do have the Pro car. Of all the vehicles in Project Cars, I've probably spent the most time driving this. I really, really like the M1 Pro car. It isn't the quickest racing car out there. I mean, it's not going that much faster down the straight than perhaps the SuperKart, really. But it is absolutely lovely through the corners. This thing has so much grip. Even on cold tyres, this thing has excellent grip. And you certainly notice the difference between warm and cold tyres on this game. It's quite a big thing. And this car is absolutely lovely to drive. It really is. It's a very, very easy car to drive and to push around a racetrack. But it's still not quicker. A 46.7 was the fastest I could get out of the M1 Pro car. Much easier to drive this car around the track than the SuperKart, but it isn't quicker over the course of the lap. Now, I was starting to get a little bit concerned. I mean, we're starting to get up to some pretty serious racing vehicles now, onto the Audi R8 LMS. This is a GT3 car, I believe is what this race is in. Has an absolutely fantastic sounding engine, one of my favourite sounding cars from this particular challenge. This is some serious racing machinery in the R8, and still I couldn't go quicker. It was a 46.9 from the Audi. Now, I'm looking at these times, that one seems a little bit funny. I'm not sure if this is just a slow GT3 car, or if I just didn't quite get the maximum out of it. As I said, every car was given 8 laps, and the reason I do that is to keep the time it takes to do this down. So perhaps I didn't get the absolute maximum. I didn't make particular massive mistakes with it, so maybe it could have gone a little bit faster, or maybe it's just a slightly slower GT3 car. It was nice to drive, and I like this car purely for the noise. I would drive this over lots of other GT3 cars just because of that engine sound, but it wasn't quicker than the SuperKart. Up next was the Mercedes SLS GT3. Again, another fairly blooming serious race car we've got going on here with the full-on racing slicks. Another car that is quite nice to drive. I had no real issues. I mean, once we start getting into these, I mean, you'd think that these are quite daunting cars, quite scary cars to drive compared to some of the road cars. In actual fact, these are nicer to drive than like the Focus and the M1 because they have so much grip in them. There is an awful lot of grip in this car. You can brake nice and late. You can carry decent corner speed, but you can't carry as much as you could with the SuperKart. While, yes, it goes quicker. It's a 45.5 for the SLS. It's still not quick enough. All of this power, all of this speed, and then all modern day suspension and brakes and racing tyres, and we still can't keep up with a SuperKart. This was sort of I never expected we would be getting to this sort of stage. I really thought that these would easily trounce the SuperKart. Up next is the Pagani Zonda R. This doesn't fit in any racing category. Pagani, I should say, sorry, built this car to be as fast as they could make it. And guess what? It was still beaten by a go-kart. Again, we're going quicker, a 45.270. It's not far off the SuperKart, but it's still slower. This one was perhaps one of the more difficult race cars to drive, in fact. I struggled a little bit with this Zonda. It just doesn't quite have the same amount of rear-end grip as some of the other cars. For example, coming out of this final corner here onto the start-finish straight, it is a little bit bumpy over here, and I can't be flat out in the Zonda. I had to sort of very gradually go on the throttle over the bumps there. You try and go flat out, it'll just spin the rear wheels and put the car on the pit wall. A lot of the other cars, you could go flat out. I think if you could go flat out in the Zonda, you would probably beat the SuperKart's time. You could be flat out in the SuperKart. So yeah, just lacking a tiny bit of rear-end grip with the Zonda, and perhaps that's what killed the time. And next vehicle, again, another car that I very much like driving on Project Cars, the Palmer Jaguar. I would recommend this car to anybody who is sort of just starting out playing this game. This is a lovely, lovely, easy car to drive. Doesn't have very much straight line speed, huge amounts of grip, excellent brakes. It's a very good car to kind of get the hang of this game with because it's so forgiving. Very easy to push this car as hard as you want around a track. Very, very forgiving car. No, it's not the most powerful, it's not the fastest accelerating, but it is very quick around the corners when you get things right. And yeah, incredibly forgiving vehicle. Still not fast enough. Still not fast. This is again another serious track car. I was fairly confident that this one would go quicker because of the huge amounts of grip that you have in it. 45.8 second lap. It's still slower. I guess it hasn't got the power of the GT3 cars, but I really thought it would beat the SuperKart because of the huge amounts of grip you get in it. Again, much easier to drive than the go-kart. I got a little bit crazy with the next vehicle. I went for a Lotus, I think it's a Type 72, or something like that. A classic Formula 1 car. Because, you know, why not? I mean, if I go for modern Formula 1 cars, yes, they're going to beat a go-kart. But what about a classic Formula 1 car? Well, this has got the most fantastic sounding engine of the day. It took quite a lot to be that Audi, but it sounds incredible, as you would imagine, from a classic Formula 1 car. It also wasn't that bad to drive, in all honesty. I was expecting this thing to be absolutely terrifying. And, I mean, it's not the easiest of cars to drive. I struggled a little bit with the locking of the rear brakes from time to time. But aside from that, it was quite an I wouldn't say too easy, but it was a lot of grip going on in this vehicle, as you would imagine from a racing car, and it wasn't too terrifying on the old power delivery front. It still wasn't quicker than a go-kart. It did a 45.349. Again, pretty damn close to the go-kart's time, but it was still slower. I was starting to run out of ideas, really, with cars. I really was not expecting to have gone so far up the race car order, if you like. I ended up settling on a Mercedes C-Class DTM car, a modern-day DTM car, with much grip, fancy brakes. It's got a movie flappy rear wing and all sorts of aero parts. These are seriously quick cars, these things. I'm presuming that these will go quicker than most GT3 cars. They're very fast around a lap of a track. I'm pretty sure they raced at Brands Hatch as well. I don't know if they still do in the DTM. I know they did at one point. And this is the first car that went quicker, finally, than the go-kart. The DTM car did a lap time of 43.5, so it's just over a second quicker than the SuperKart. We've finally beaten the go-kart. It has taken a DTM, a modern-day DTM racing vehicle, to do it, though. And then when we move on to something a little bit more extreme. I'm not really a LMP person. I don't really drive these cars very often, so I'm not the best to be driving these around the track. This is a P20. It's an LMP2 car. Now, I'm presuming that's the lower category. I don't really know what the difference is between the LMP1 and LMP2 cars are. They look almost the same, so I'm not sure. Maybe it's to do with the amount of power they have. I don't know. Either way, the LMP2 car set a 43.3 second lap time. So again, quicker than the SuperKart, and I'm assuming the LMP1s would go even faster. I'm pretty sure that this car here can go quicker. As I said, I'm not really an expert. I much prefer my touring cars to the LMP vehicles. But yeah, this was a nice, easy, relatively easy car to drive around this track. Again, had a little bit of problem with locking the brakes up on a couple of corners. Got to be a little bit careful with this thing. But yeah, unsurprisingly, really, this goes quicker than a go-kart. That's not... I'm not surprised to see LMP cars going quicker. Our final vehicle is the Mercedes Sauber. I do quite like this racing vehicle, and I'm going to be honest, I never expected to be having to compare a Mercedes Sauber to a go-kart. However, I am here comparing the two of them, and the Sauber was the quickest of the cars that I took around here. It got to a 42.988 second lap time, so 2 seconds quicker than the SuperKart around Brands Hatch. And the Mercedes, this is quite a scary car to drive, I'll be honest. This is quite ferocious on the power delivery front, and this is quite a bumpy track. It's a little difficult to drive, the Mercedes, probably not as difficult as the go-kart, in all honesty. I think the go-kart is probably one of the hardest cars I had to drive around this track. But it does go quicker than the SuperKart, but only by 2 seconds. That's really a testament to just how bloody fast that go-kart is. Like, the SuperKart is absolutely crazy. If we're having to get up to LMP cars and DTM cars to go quicker than that go-kart, that is seriously fast. That's very, very quick. I mean, yes, I am driving on a relatively short track. It is a track that I know quite well. And I mean, it's not exactly the tightest and twistiest of tracks. You know, there's still a fair amount for the short length. There's still a fair amount of straights. So yeah, the SuperKart is very, very quick. Tough to drive. Will take a bit of getting used to, but it is seriously, seriously quick. I really didn't expect it to be able to beat so many racing vehicles and beat the road vehicles, sort of the fastest road vehicles money can buy, by quite such a huge margin. But there we go, that is it for this video, guys. So thank you very much for watching, and until next time, a goodbye.